I don't think a major title would have changed much for me. I thought it will change me and change me as a person. But then this part never really came because just by winning something on the outside doesn't really change anything on the inside. I was so close. I was number 9 in the world. I played semis in those majors a lot of times, but I never quite got over the finish line. And that really stressed me out. And all the fun part just went away and became pure pressure and running after something.
Andrea.
Hi, Jan. Wait, do I have to call you Jan now?
Jan. There's a funny ad in Australia because Jan is a woman's name over there.
Oh,
so
okay.
My wife will never let me order coffee because they won't give it to me. Because it's like coffee order for Jan. And I'm like, but you're a guy. And I'm like, well, it's complicated.
Well, it's similar for me. Andrea in Italy is a boy's name. Yeah. And I used to, when I was 14, 15, when I started playing professional tennis, I played a lot of tournaments in Italy because it was easy to get there. Trains were really cheap and you could just take a train for 12 euros, go to Italy, play a tournament. But people would always be very confused back then when I said I'm Andrea. So I feel your pain of being mistaken for other people.
I have a feeling they were confused until you started serving and the game started going on. I'd actually love to start right there and wonder if for you tennis was a pure passion thing at that stage.
Ooh, that's a good question to start away. So first of all, I will try and not take over the podcast because I have so many questions for you too. And I'm really trying to be the one that is not going to. But how was that for you? I will try, but please forgive me if I don't. So I think it was, although I will say at the point of being a teenager, which for me was 13, 14, 15 years old, and obviously not having a fully developed adult brain yet, but already thinking in terms of where is my place in the world? Who do I want to impress? What do I want to prove to society, family, friends, whatever it was? I think there it already started switching a little bit. I think up until then, let's say while I was a child, it was all about just wanting to play and wanting to run after a yellow ball all the time. And the moment I think puberty hit and the moment you start to ask yourself who you are in the world, that's when that passion kind of, the purity of the passion sort of slips into a bigger question of what you want to tell the world with what you do. I don't know, how was it for you? Was it the same for you?
Didn't you just say you're not going to do that?
I know.
I'm not great at playing returns, by the way. No, it's funny because I can really relate because like sports for me was, I just wanted to be somebody who's not nobody. Right, like I was kind of an only child. We emigrated to South Africa in the early 90s and kind of had, no friends, just, getting into a new place. And I really always felt like sports was my escape valve. Like on one hand, it was the thing, like if I were to personify sports, it was the one thing that always gave me a hug and said, hey, you're okay, let's go. It was kind of like always there for me. Whereas, I think that pretty quickly turned into a status game, I guess, that we all sort of play through sports.
Yeah, it's sad, right? But I think it's normal on the other hand. I think it's there for anybody. I mean, there are a few people, I know a handful of people who never really care. I was just going to say, I think it's fewer than a handful of people. I can maybe 2 people in my life that I know, 2 friends that really do not care what other people think at all. Everyone else kind of does care. And it feels like the older you get, the less you care, which is a good thing, I think, with age.
And you know them well enough to believe them? Because I'm like, that would be the magic pill, right?
Yes, well, they are artists, I will say. And I think that if you have a creative mind and if you just see the world differently, you will also have maybe different values than most of as other people. Because in the end, being an athlete, yes, it's a passion. And I think it's like to be portrayed as a passion. But in the end, if you think about it further, it's the quickest way to fulfill the promise of capitalism. Because at 18, 19 years old, if you're really good, you can already make a ton of money. So, and for me, I'm not from a wealthy family. And that was definitely part of it. I would never say I played for the money, but it was very obvious in my mind that if I continue on this path, I can make more money quicker than if I went down other paths and went to study and went through a long education. I think that was definitely part of it. Not the full story, but definitely part of it.
Yeah, it is weird that way, right? Because at the time, everybody tells you you're never going to make money this easily again. Whereas
true, yeah.
you're like, I'm literally working my ass off like every day. Like, who
easily,
are you to say
right?
this is easy?
Quote unquote, yeah, easily. You just have to practice 8 hours a day, maybe faint in a training session, and you're never gonna make money as easy.
Totally. Which brings me to your relationship with tennis. Like, how did your relationship with tennis kind of evolve over the years? So you've said you kind of, it started off just chasing a yellow ball. Then the status games come into it. And later in life, I guess I'm assuming, probably shouldn't lead with that, but for me at least, I became aware of the finite part.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Where did that go for you?
Well, I would always say, I think I wanted to say before you finished your question, I wanted to say, for me, my career as a tennis player, as a professional tennis player on the tour came in 3 phases. But now that you mentioned the finite part of it, I would even put 4 phases on it. The first phase is you're an up-and-comer, you come on tour, everything is new, everything is so sparkly and fun and exciting, and the successes come quick because you're young, you're not thinking about the pressures, you're earning money, you're earning points. And you're meeting people like Roger Federer and Rafael Nadal. They are warming up next to you. Novak Djokovic is your friend. And you get just so overwhelmed in a good way by this new world that you're suddenly part of. I think that was a really, really fun part until I was maybe 23, 24. Then for me came a second phase where I started to become aware of, okay, I'm now a part of the WTA tour. People now expect me to do certain things. They expect me to earn certain wins, to do things that I haven't done yet. Will I be able to do that? So that's the second phase. And I think in differentiating myself from you in this moment, I never achieved my goals of being number one, of winning major titles. I won a few titles, but they were not as big as the ones that in tennis count the most, which are the 4 Grand Slam tournaments, Australian Open, US Open, Wimbledon, and French Open. And so that second phase gave me a lot of stress because I was so close. I was number 9 in the world. I played semis in those majors a lot of times, but I never quite got over the finish line. And that really stressed me out. And all the fun part just went away and became pure pressure and running after something that eventually for me would never come. And so the end of the second phase was kind of a burnout. I wouldn't want to say a full burnout, but I took a 3-month break. It was when I was 28, 29. I was wondering if I still wanted to play tennis. So I took a 3.5-month break, didn't play at all, didn't work out much, just like went for easy runs, went to the gym whenever I wanted to. And then started phase 3, which was a beautiful phase. And that was just playing for the sakes of it, playing because I loved the sport. And it was almost a reminder of how it was when I was still a child. I had sort of made my peace with never having won a big title. I knew that I had a good career. I was making good money. I had my place in the world. I was still beating top players and champions, and I was still part of that elite. And that was, I want to say, the most beautiful part of my career, apart from the first phase where everything was just new. And that lasted 4 years or so before exactly what you just said. And that's, for me, the phase 4, before I started realizing, all this beauty that I have now managed within myself to gather is about to end, because like I worked so hard on myself rather than as a tennis player, I worked so hard on my personality for 12 years to sort of rid myself of all this desire that I'm only worth something if I win that big title. I'm now finally playing for the love of the game, for the competition, for getting better, for improving. And now it's about to end? Come on. And for me, I don't know how it was for you. For me, the last 2 years were really tough because I really still loved playing when I finished. So when I retired, I was 35 and my body was just not able to do the training in the quantities that as a tennis player you have to do to be able to hang with the best in the world. And I could feel my quality of play slipping. I could feel my body slipping, but my mind still wanted to continue and I still loved doing what I did. So the retirement was really not easy. But interestingly enough, the 2 years before retirement were not easy. Then when I retired, I was like, okay, on we go. I think I had done a lot of grieving of the retirement while I was still playing. Was that the same for you, or did you grieve your career after it was done?
It's really weird, right? Like, because you talk about it, and I won my first world title when I was 34. So I was a super late bloomer. I won my first ever race at 27. And then I had this magic time between kind of 36 and 39 where everything just went to plan. Then lockdown, kind of got injured and then swore I'd get back there like one last time, which was like a long kind of injury-ridden phase where literally it was all just willpower, just muscling through. And then, ironically, I won my second last race, and my last race I sucked. Like I really sucked.
Really?
I came
Interesting.
like nowhere, and all my friends were there, and it was like literally like the promenade in Nice, where kind of everybody from near and far traveled, and I was totally cool with it. It was the first time ever that I was happy with just not fulfilling that expectation, and that's why I knew it was time to go, and that's why I probably never grieved for it either, in the same way. I don't know. I guess it's very different in terms of the sports and where you are in life, but I really think, I mean, for you, do you think phase 2 is necessary to get to phase 3, and phase 3 is necessary to get phase 4? Like, do we need this kind of constant like suffering and enjoyment and like to realize where we're actually at? Like, can it ever just be good?
I wish I could say no, because I want to portray the picture for people who are maybe still at the beginning of something like that. Maybe there's some 17-year-old who listens to this and still has everything ahead of them. And I would like to say, oh no, maybe for my friends who did win the big title and did become number one, maybe for them it was different. Unfortunately, knowing my friends, having spoken to them, I don't think a major title would have changed much for me. Yes, it would have given me the one thing I always dreamed of, and it probably would have given me a tremendous amount of happiness in that moment. But from every single person that I've talked to, and I'm excluding the GOATs here, I'm excluding the Federers, the Nadals, the Djokovic's, and the Serena Williamses, and I will get to that, they have a different mindset. I think for all of them, after the big win, and maybe you can touch a little bit on that, after the big win, the thing they always dreamed of actually came a sort of, I don't want to say depression, that's too hard of a word, but a sort of emptiness, a phase of emptiness of, I've worked all my life for this. I thought it will change me and change me as a person. But then this part never really came, because just by winning something on the outside doesn't really change anything on the inside. You have to do the work for it to seep into the inside and your identity, and also be, that you are happy with yourself. Doesn't have necessarily anything to do with the amount of money on your account or the trophy on a shelf. However, I will say for the Federers and the Nadals and the Djokovic's, the GOATs, they somehow always found a way to stay and remain hungry. And that's the exception to the rule. Everyone else I know in sports, and I know a lot of people who have had that big high, usually have a big low after that, even if it's not on the outside, but on the inside. Federer, Nadal, Djokovic, Serena Williams particularly, they would win a big thing and they would wake up the next morning and basically wanted to go back on the practice court to win the next thing. And that is very unusual. And I think that's why they go down in the history as the greatest of all time. That's a mindset that is just, I hate to say not normal, but it's not normal. You know?
Yeah.
Did you have that emptiness after winning big things?
Do you know who Scotty Scheffler is?
Yes, I do.
Did you watch that interview with him after, I don't know if it was, I think it was Augusta, but honestly, I don't know. Did you watch the interview?
I haven't watched it, but I have heard about it, I think. But tell everybody what it is about.
So basically, he talks about dedicating his life to the purpose of winning and fine-tuning and going out there and practicing and doing all the things, and then getting there and being like, why? Like, why am I doing that? This is great. And you spray champagne, and 5 minutes later, it's like, okay, what's for dinner? And there is this expectation we put to outside events, like to change our lives and to really get to the place that we think will make us whole. Whereas exactly like you say, it's kind of that journey. And I find it so remarkable in tennis because I think I can say this without any disrespect, but like even you speak of the great Roger Federer, I think he's won 54% of points in his life. Like he's literally won and lost the same amount of points. It's like, this is unimaginable in our kind of space. Like the question is, how do you deal with that? Like, how do you kind of, because it's a double-edged sword for me in the sense that you need it in the split second that you lose the point or make the point or whatever. But also with the tournaments, like you've won tournaments, perhaps not the greatest ones you had on your own bucket list, but you've won. How did you go and celebrate?
Well, yeah, I didn't spray any champagne, but it was kind of similar where you're like, well, am I about to have this drink? But I do have to play again, because in tennis, I don't know how many of your followers follow tennis as well. But in tennis, the season is very different to a lot of other sports. We start on January 1st, and our season goes deep into November. And basically, you can play every week if you wanted to. There is a certain kind of scheduling that you make at the beginning of the year with your coach, and you try to have peaks throughout the year that you play a little bit more and then you rest. But generally speaking, if I wanted to play every week, every Monday of every week in the year, I could do that from January 1st well into November. And I remember winning my first big title, but I was entered into the next tournament. So I won on Sunday, and I was supposed to play a match the next day on Monday. And my coach, God bless him, he told me, I think you should pull out of the tournament. This is a big title. I think you need to emotionally, maybe not physically, I was 19 or so, I would have been fine. Maybe not physically, but emotionally, you need to sort of reckon with what you're going through. And also, let's go have fun tonight, Why would we now go travel 3 hours and then, try to perform again tomorrow? And so that is definitely part of it. But I do think that in a way, it's also a blessing in disguise that in tennis, the next tournament is just around the corner all the time. So you don't get caught up too much in neither the highs nor the lows. And if you do, you will be punished very quickly. I did that at the beginning stages of my career, where when I lost, I would wallow in my pain for 3 days in my hotel room, order room service, and just feel sorry for myself. But that led nowhere. I just lost 3 practice days for nothing. And
but
so,
sorry to interrupt you right here, though. Like, do you think, though, at that stage, that's exactly what you need? Like, it has to hurt. Like, it's just a sign that you really care.
I guess so. But it's so interesting because after I retired, I did some mentoring for some younger girls. And the one thing I tried to tell them, and that's the one thing you can repeat yourself over and over again. I could have taken a metal hammer and tried to knock it into their heads. That's the one thing they do not hear, right? I tried to tell them, girls, you're 17 years old. You lost a match yesterday. When you retire, if you are blessed enough to have a long career as I had, I played 16 years. When you retire, you will not remember who you played, where you played, and what you played on this particular day. Don't take losses that badly. Write down what you want to improve, and we'll go back on the practice court tomorrow. But don't let them get to you so badly. Not a single word heard. Not a single word. I can just see their eyes glaze over. There's just like this emptiness on their face. And I'm like, I'm talking, but nothing is arriving. And no one's home. Exactly. And when I think back to my younger self, when I was 17, 18, I think Jesus Christ himself could have come back from heaven and told me, Andrea, this is really, nobody cares. And I would have been like, Jesus, go back to heaven. I got this,
Hang on, hold my beer. Hold my beer.
Yeah, exactly. So in a way, I don't think that's the one thing I always felt like I can't get through to them. Everything else, they would really listen and try to, like a sponge. This is the great thing with young talents. They want to have all your knowledge, all your experience, and everything just seeps in through them. That was the one thing where I could just see like nothing on the other side.
Do you see your younger self in them?
Of course. And I also felt so stupid myself for trying, because I know how it was when older people told me things like that. And I guess in the end, it is I think what in tennis, but in all sports, what you do is very similar to other things, because people like to sometimes portray athletes or professional athletes as these aliens that do something completely different. I think we do something very similar to other people. It's just compressed in terms of intensity and in terms of length, because the career is just so much shorter. So you have to go through all the phases that probably other people go through as well in a very compressed period of time. And the intensity is also much higher. If you think of other people, they will have hardships and jobs too. But for you, it can be losing on Tuesday to your biggest rival. And then 2 days later, you have to play again. And now how will you cope with that loss within 2 days, because you have to play again 2 days later? I think that's the beauty and the challenge of sports, that everything goes so fast and that you are so young. Usually people peak which was probably very lucky for you, that your first big title was when you were 34. You were already a man. You were already an adult. Whereas in tennis, a lot of players celebrate their biggest first success when they are still teenagers, when they are 18, 19, 20 years old, and their frontal lobe has not fully developed yet. They like, what are they going to do? And you see that very often with, there was just this example, Emma Raducanu a few years back, who won the US Open out of nowhere, literally out of nowhere. It was one of the greatest sports stories ever. She was only 18 years old, won the US Open, English girl, very beautiful, very smart. And all the brands in the world threw themselves at her, and she kind of disappeared for 3.5 years. Now she's doing much better again, and I'm so glad that she's on that path of rebuilding. But that's not a normal experience to have when you're an 18, 19-year-old. And I'm glad for you that you were already a mature person and could probably handle it better at 34.
That is to be debated, but
really? Why? Tell me why.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I was always super slow to pick up on things. Like, it really took me a while, and I had all the highs and the lows that you speak of. Like after the Olympics, like that proper letdown afterwards, where I just went out and partied, and I was probably an asshole to a lot of people, and I just like couldn't stick to my actual values. Like, I hadn't really defined my values, right? This was something like this dream that was kind of handed to me by my grandparents, really, and their love for the Olympic Games. And it was just something that I literally just was a cat chasing a mouse, like blinkers on. And when it came off, I kind of, was probably more lucky that triathlon in that sense is not as much in the limelight. Like, you get to live things out on center court. Everyone's watching, your whole private life. Everybody wants to know a lot more about it in terms of whereas that's very punctual or very situational for us, where it's kind of like we go to these events and everything, unfolds and it's crazy and people point fingers, but I don't think the public scrutiny is quite the same. If you look at, again, a big fan, but look at Boris, look at Boris Becker and the public scrutiny. Like, I wish that upon no one. And he started winning when he was 17. I don't understand
exactly
how from there you go on to be so resilient and drive that kind of thing. Which brings me to the question whether you actually wear a mask on court. Is Petko and Andrea, is that like two different people for you?
Well, definitely. So I am the strong and firm believer that everyone that enters the stage of tennis, quote unquote, and you just mentioned Boris, I have a podcast with him, and he often talks about how the tennis court was a stage for him, and he would go out there with a certain performing persona on one hand, and on the other hand, he also demanded the attention of the audience to perform his best. If that was not there, best example in tennis is the US Open, Arthur Ashe Stadium, 7 p.m., 24,000 people, mostly New Yorkers who don't really watch tennis, but they want to go, they want to go to the US Open. It's a cool thing to do. They had a couple of honeydeuces, which is a cocktail that is overrated, in my opinion, absolutely overrated, but a lot of people have it. And so they're a little drunk, and they're there to catch up on their day as well as watch a little bit of tennis. So there's a lot of chatter. It's very noisy. And Boris told me this fun story on our podcast a couple of weeks ago, where he said, when I walked out on Arthur Ashe, and he won that tournament, I think 2 or 3 times. Mm-hmm. When I walked out on Arthur Ashe, I would do something absolutely egregious in the first 3-4 games of the match, just to tell the people, I am here and I expect you to watch me for the next 3.5 hours while I play my heart out there. And whether that was a big emotional outburst or throwing off the racket or a huge fight with the chair umpire. And so he was actively playing with that role. I wasn't as confident in my role to be able to, manipulate it as others. Mm-hmm. And I see it with other players who are much better. But I definitely also had a facade up when I walked up on court. And I mean, it's a classic not showing any weaknesses, trying to portray a facade of basically strength and confidence. And I know what I'm doing here. And even when I miss, I'm not bothered by it. That is typically what you try to portray. As I said, I was not as confident in what I was doing all the time. So my facade oftentimes slipped, and the emotional outbursts were real. They were not played. They were not there to gather any attention. They were oftentimes just the mask slipping for a second. But that is definitely a thing. And I now work as an expert for TVs. And I oftentimes talk about it when sometimes my play-by-play asks me like, oh, how is this person in the locker room? They always seem so serious. And very many times I have to tell them, you cannot tell anything about a person's character by watching them on one of the biggest stages they are playing. Yes, you can tell some things when the pressure is the highest, the real core of the person comes out. But when they come out on court and they've been prepping for the match for the last 3 hours, they are wearing a persona, and you can't really gather anything from that. And there are so many players that are so different in the locker room to how they are on court. And Rafael Nadal is the best example. He was the most intense, serious guy on the court you will ever see. And off the court, he was always joking. He was always playing games. He was always, playing soccer, like just a little boy having fun with his friends. And then he would walk out on court, and you could see the other players hiding, scared of Rafael Nadal. And so, I think that there is definitely a persona in tennis and on the stage of the tennis court.
And even for you, so you who has seen the highs, the lows, you has been through it. I know it's your own journey, but as an expert now, can you see some of the telltales in your younger players? Do you know, like, what for you, is there something that you pick up on?
Well, it's so interesting. And I'm not sure if everyone sees it because, there are very perceptive people, whether they are experts or not. But I've worked in TV now for 3.5 years, I want to say, maybe 4. And there are some players that I commentate on so much that by a slight raise by their eyebrow, I can tell whether they are nervous or not. And I had that last year or actually this year, 2025, I had that with Jannik Sinner. For some reason, I had to commentate on every single of his matches. I basically saw everything that he played and didn't play. And in Wimbledon, I could predict when he was about to serve a double fault or play, which is very rarely for him to play badly, by the way. But when he had these little slippages that only last 3-4 minutes for him, I was so attuned to him that I could almost predict it every time. And I think it is it is the repetition, right? Seeing somebody so many times, week in, week out, every single day, every match that they play under the highest amount of pressure, is you pick up on little details. And as a opponent, it's much harder, obviously, because you're contesting mostly with yourself and then with your opponent. But as a commentator, where this is your entire job to watch the two players on court, and also it's much easier for somebody like me who commentates on tennis and not on soccer, football, or basketball, or triathlon. Where there are exactly, but where there are so many athletes competing at the same time, it's hard to be completely attuned to one of them. With tennis, two players, you can quite tune into them when you really focus and when you try to read their facial expressions. But most of them do a very, very good job in keeping up a facade.
I mean, every sport has its trickiness, but I feel like as a tennis player, you'd read most triathletes like a book. But
well, that's the tough part in triathlon. I feel like also, this is my hot take of the day, my theory. I think holding up a facade is a thing that you can only do for certain periods of time. So triathlon already works really actively against a facade because it lasts for so long. How hard that would be psychologically, mentally, and emotionally to keep up a facade for, I don't know, you ran a triathlon in 1 hour, but for one of us, like 25 hours to keep a facade up, that's virtually impossible. So I do think the length of a competition makes things very hard to keep it up.
I would counter that by saying you have to play a tournament and it goes over a long time and your matches are not done in 45 minutes either. I mean, it's the actual point, the focus bit, but in between, it's so relevant, like reading the nuances, reading someone else, all whilst, like you say, you're also trying to sail your own ship.
Yeah, it's very, I mean, there are players who have built an entire career on being able to do that. We have one woman, I wanted to say girl because she's still very young, but she's like 22, 23. Her name is Emma Navarro, and she's from the US. She's an American player, and she's quite small. She's not the tallest. She's not the strongest. She has a great touch. She's very talented, but just in terms of how tennis has developed with all these tall players, very muscular, very athletic. She is not that, right? But she has a talent that I've never seen in anybody else. She watches and reads her opponents like a book. She knows they are about to have an emotional slippage before they know that themselves. And that's when she locks in, doesn't miss. And she exploited so many of these types of matches where she profited off just of a lapse of focus from the other person because she was so there in that moment, so present that she would be able to read that. And I think that's the challenge, that you are not distracted by all the noise in your own head and what is going on in your own self, but that you are just clear and in the purity of the moment can read what the other one is doing on the other side.
Yeah, maybe direct your energy. You've spoken how you're now a commentator and you have written a wonderful book, by the way, which I really, truly enjoyed about your retirement. Can I ask why on Spotify it's listed as an album? It's listed as an album. You have
really?
56 tracks on, and it's not listed as a book. And it's like...
That is so strange.
It is kind of weird. I was wondering if that's because if you then go to it, therefore you get Andrea Petkovic Radio, which comes up with all sorts of other chapters that it builds together from different books, which is, I guess, it's kind of a AI-related slip-up to you. But the point I'm actually trying to get to is that there is so much more to you than the athlete, right? You have a passion for reading, writing, for the arts. Take us a little bit into that world and how you hold those two together in your mind.
That's a good question. I always wonder whether I was a tennis player first or a writer first, but now the older I get, I think I was a writer first, and tennis gave me an insight of people who just do tremendous things, who accomplish things that we could never do, right? Us normal people, quote unquote. As I said, I was a very good tennis player, but when you don't quite achieve the heights of your peers and your colleagues and your friends, who you are very close with and who you chat with, you see there is a little bit of a difference in attitude. I know that my attitude was just a tiny bit different than Serena Williams's or Angie Kerber's, or, they had this deep innate trust in themselves as tennis players. And I always struggled with that. I would always, doubt myself, doubt my abilities. And so I never quite actually got to that. I got there punctually, but never for longer periods of time to that very innate trust within your capabilities. I never had that, but it gave me this luxury of being able to watch them and being able to see what they do different and how they prep and how their minds work. And so I do think now that that was the writer in me, watching them and being so grateful for being able to be around those people and chat them and call them my colleagues and friends and get a glimpse into their minds, because I never had that mind. And so I think that that's why tennis was so attractive to me in a way, because it was this one-on-one battle, this game of mind and game of mentality. And so it was always so interesting to me. And I think that's why it never lost its fascination for me, even at the very end. And I would have continued to play if my body had continued. But just to put it, that was me personally, but to put it a bit on a broader scale, that's been, I don't know how it is for men, to be honest, but for women, this has always been a big discussion. When women have other interests, it's oftentimes, discussed in the press as, why is she not only focusing on one thing? And that was the case with me. But I see that with people like Maria Sharapova, who was a very smart businesswoman from the moment she won Wimbledon when she was 17 years old. I talked to her agent and he told me when Maria turned 15, she expected to be CC'd in every single email that was ever written on her behalf. That is not normal for a 15-year-old professional athlete who's going to win Wimbledon 2 years later. She was always a very smart businesswoman, and she still is. Now that she's retired, she still has great businesses that are very successful. And she was criticized for that. The moment she lost a few matches early on, it was she's too focused on her furniture line and she's designing things with Nike. And the same goes for Serena Williams, who also always had other interests. So, it's complicated to keep up other interests while you are doing something that requires your full attention. But I also think it's possible. And I also think that it's healthy, because what you mentioned at the beginning of this podcast, the time as a professional athlete is finite. And when it ends, there are hopefully still 30, 40 more years to fill. And if you didn't have any interest, there is a big, big emptiness waiting for you. And I've seen that with colleagues and friends of mine, where the ones that did have interest fell on quite a soft pillow and a soft mattress. And others had to go through a tough time to find what actually makes them happy when they are not on court or in the gym.
Yeah, I wonder if finding that passion for something is always got to be connected to some kind of pain. Like I have this weird take, and I guess I'm an endurance athlete and a triathlete, so I have a really weird
pain
relationship.
Is necessary.
Totally no. I'll spare you all the platitudes of sports wisdom, but the instant thing when I thought about it, and when I think of you and having this interest and having this genuine talent as a writer, and having this kind of alternative world, it also gives you an alternative. And I look at myself, for instance, and I knew this was my one ticket to change my stars, and it had to work out. Like there was nothing else. Like I tried university for 3 weeks. I hated it, hated every second of it. I was like, granted, I studied business because that's what somebody did. My dad was like, just do one thing and do it properly. And I sometimes wonder, having all this, let's call it cognitive power that you do, is something that actually gets in the way or gives you an option when others have to fight through, when others have to kick that door in, when others have to pick themselves up.
That's a really interesting point. I've never thought about it that way. What I have been asked oftentimes is whether being smart, whatever that means, I'm putting quote, which helps in a podcast always when you make gestures, quote, smart, unquote. But, some people look at the video as well. So I was often asked that, being smart, does that help you or does that hurt you? And I will say there were many moments that I would pre-analyze matches that I was still playing. I was in the middle of playing them, and I would sit on my bench and think like, oh, I wonder how I will think of this afterwards. I should have really captured. Yeah, I would sit on the bench, miss the break point opportunity, let's say, and I would sit down on the bench and I would be like, if I lose this match, I will be really pissed about that one breakpoint opportunity that I should have gone down the line instead of cross court. That was really a pussy move from me. That's what I would think and say sometimes to myself on the bench. So I'm pretty sure that doesn't help. I'm pretty sure that doesn't help. But what you are bringing up is a different point that I've never thought about. And I'm glad I didn't while I was playing. But that is, I strongly believe in the subconscious and the subliminal. I really do think that people have a lot going on under the surface that sometimes they can access, but many times they cannot. And maybe I knew at the bottom of my heart that if all this doesn't work out, I can still do something else and I will be happy doing it because I love writing, because I love reading, because I love, I have another big passion in my life that I can always turn to. And so maybe it just made the knife a little less sharp in the moments when I maybe should have pushed over the finish line or should have pushed over certain limits that are necessary to be pushed as a professional athlete. I don't know. Obviously, it's tough to say looking back at the past, but I strongly believe in the possibility because I do think that the subconscious of all of us is very strong and we have difficulty. I honestly believe you had the hot take about pain and suffering. My hot take is that the curse of humanity is that we never really fully access our subconscious and there is always something else going on. And we try to get to that other layer, but we are not sure how to get there.
Yeah, it really is. There's so much, the complexity of it, right? This is what bothers me very often with like these kind of standard questions where people are always looking for that one thing. They're looking for the one thing. What would you change in your career? And I'm like, if you change one thing, other than that you're tempting fate, you're not really doing anything because it's just a world of possibilities that change all the time. But listening to you, having this interest and then going through that in your mind whilst you're in it, right? Do you sometimes think that maybe you became a tennis player just to live the intensity of the emotions and to be able to express them and actually, because when you feel something, it's different to being told it.
Yeah.
It just comes to mind.
Yeah, that's a really good question because my friends oftentimes tell me that I have no emotions, which is, I always think I have so many emotions, but it's true. I can be very, yes, I can be very, and other people would then say that know me better, or you just compartmentalize them, right? And that's what you kind of learn also as an athlete, because if you give in to the wrath of the moment, you will lose the match, So you have to sort of be able to control emotions to a certain extent. You can't do it all the time, but you can do it to a certain extent. And so maybe, yes, if I hadn't been in these extreme situations of a tennis player with all that pressure and all these people watching, maybe I would have never tapped into those extreme emotions because, as my friends say, I don't have emotions. That's what they say. I don't think so. I think I have a lot of emotions. But sometimes that's what people say about me, is that I seem so, buttoned up in a lot of things. But I don't think so. I always cry at films and weddings and stuff. So
yeah, it's probably also something you had to have as a player, right? Is that kind of steel emotion and not showing it. And I think another thing that brings up a lot of emotions for athletes specifically, and you've touched on the fact, like if your body would have held it up, is injury and how your relationship to injury has changed. I'm assuming it's changed over the time. Again, I shouldn't assume. Like if you think of your first ever injury and how you dealt with it mentally, of course, physically, this is called going mental, Petkovic going mental. So please stay on that part. I don't care about your taping routine. Just at this very moment, like at least for me, a world collapsed. How was that for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I had my first big injury when I was 19 years old. I was at the Australian Open and I twisted my knee, and it wasn't that bad. It hurt very much in the moment, but after that, it wasn't so bad. So I thought, oh, I got lucky. I just strained it. It was a weird twist. And then eventually it turned out that I had torn my ACL. So I was out for more or less 1 year. And I was exactly as you said, I was just so devastated. And I'm so glad now that back then I was 19. It wasn't, I mean, social media was already existing, but not as big. And I feel like I could have gotten lost in the weeds of the internet. But there, I just had to sit in my emotions. I had to just sit there and suffer through this devastating blow of. And it was also my first major tournament that I had ever qualified for through my ranking. So I was in the main draw for the first time. I was playing a big player in a big stadium, and then my ACL tore, or I tore my ACL. And that first year was just, I mean, eventually you get used to anything, but it was so devastating because also you always compare yourself. I don't know how it is in triathlon, but in tennis, you always compare yourself to your peers. You always compare yourself to your compatriots that you grew up with, which is, in my case, I was born in 87. So all the girls in that moment who were born in 88, 87, 89, I looked at all of them, and 19 is an age where the development goes really quickly. So I would see them make all these big steps, and players that I had beaten a month ago were now in the semis and finals of major tournaments, winning big titles. They were in the top 10, and my ranking was just slowly slipping until eventually I think I was ranked 390 or something in the world when I returned. And it was just, I think what you learn also as you grow older is to deal with moments of impotence, right? Because in that moment I was just powerless and I could not deal with it mentally. I had lost control, and I just, I don't know how to put it differently, but I couldn't deal with it. I was just in so much anxiety and pain this entire time. And I think later when I grew up and I matured, I learned much better to accept things that I couldn't control. And so when I got injured again after 5-6 years, I had 5-6 years of really, really good run. And then I don't remember. Oh, I twisted my ankle. Yeah, I had to have another surgery on my ankle. And but I was much better prepared mentally for this. It was still devastating in the moment, but the devastation didn't last as long. And also it was easier for me to see the path out in a way. I just kind of did a to-do list for every day and just worked through it. And I tried not to look too much ahead in the future. I tried to watch tennis very neutrally without putting too many emotions in. It was much easier to handle. But that first at 19, that first big injury was just brutal in that moment. Yeah. What was your first big injury again? Did you have a
I had
stress
a few.
fracture?
Yeah, I had a stress fracture, and then eventually I had a few bike crashes, and basically I almost came to an end with it's called a Morel Lavalier, which when it has a name, you're in trouble.
You're fucked. Sorry, I'm not just about to.
No, totally. Which was kind of counted with a sepsis and some broken ribs and whatever else. But again, I always had these minor things, but what I found in phases of injury, exactly like you say, in the beginning, your world comes crashing down. I remember leading into the London Olympics, I had a nerve injury that took about 12 months to actually diagnose. So traveled the world and tried to find all these people. And when you stand in someone like Müller-Wohlfahrt's office and he's like, sorry, man, I can't help you. That's like one of those moments where you're like, your heart just sinks and it's like, really you? But numb to it, eventually, I found it almost turns into a focus because you really just focus and you're locked in and you have all these things swirling around your orbit, but then all of a sudden it's just one thing that really matters.
Yeah, that's interesting. I never put it that way, but it's exactly that. You get like 2 days of feeling sorry for yourself, and then you kind of go into the competition mode, but in a different way. You're like, okay, I'm going to get my body. And oftentimes I would reevaluate in these moments, like how I ate, how I slept, all these other things that helped me eventually in my career post-injury because I would just get healthy. I would get to know myself better, and I was able to be a better performer after those injuries. So. And I do think this is really important because when I retired, people sometimes said to me, "Oh, but you had so many injuries, you already had a test drive at retiring, right?" And I'm like, do you know how hard athletes work when they get injured? They work arguably harder when they are injured than when they are not injured because they are in freaking rehab for 9 hours every day, moving one single muscle 100 million times per hour just so that it builds. And it's much harder. I would much rather practice on the court 4 hours than be in the rehab center for 9, surrounded by other people who are injured, telling you about the injury all day. Like I can think of other things.
Yeah,
but
totally.
That was the one thing that annoyed me. I don't know if other people is like, "Oh, but you had a test drive at retirement, right? Because you were injured so many times." I'm like, bro, grow up.
How annoying in your world are armchair experts? Like this, I mean, it's next to soccer. Like everybody knows how to do it better than you do. Clearly,
it's so true. So when I was young, I would just be so overwhelmed by the situation that I would actually nod and say, "Oh yeah, you're right. I should think about this." People would straight up come up to me and say, "I saw something on the grip on your forehand. If you were able to just, change it by 10 degrees, I think your forehand could be much better." Yeah, exactly. And I'm thinking to myself, you don't think the coach that I pay for the last 5 years, a good sum of money, hasn't thought about every single thing that he could change or improve or whatever. And then also, and I had a talk with Brett Gilbert last week it was, and he's one of the best tennis coaches that's ever existed. He coached Andre Agassi. He coached Coco Gauff just recently. She won a big title, major title at the US Open with him by her side. And it was so interesting. He was like, it was so tough when he was coaching Coco because everyone thought they knew better. But he said, as a coach, my task is not to see what I can do better, but my coach as a task is, how can I improve the player without destroying their confidence? If I go up to, say, Coco or me and change her forehand grip, and then she can't put the ball in the court anymore, I have done nothing for her, even though maybe on paper this is the right thing to do. So as a coach, you're not only deciding what would be the ideal technique, but what is the possible technique at this moment of time for a 23-year-old, for a 28-year-old, for a 30-year-old. It's always different. And so that's why you should never go up to a coach and tell them what to do to their player if you are not part of the sports. It's just my tip from me to you.
To anyone, unsolicited advice in general is not the best thing. Goes for it. Just because it's your hobby and you're passionate.
And it's so funny, Jan, because I am so allergic to that I am resistant to giving advice. So sometimes I will get booked to give advice and I don't do it, because I'm like, I don't want to tell them what to do. And people would come up to me and be like, "Hey, what can I do and change on my serve?" And I'd be like, "I don't know. It's your decision. You go ahead and try it out." And they're like, "I booked you for this." And I was like, "Oh, yeah, sure. Okay, let's try maybe this." But I'm really weird at giving advice because, I've gotten so many over the years.
Which is funny because you mentor young athletes, you mentor young tennis players. So
I do, yeah.
Again, another one of those contradictions that we all have. By the way, I wasn't trying to put that on you.
All good.
How do you go and then trust your team? Are you good at trusting the process, trusting your team? Because when the outside guy says change your forehand by 10 degrees, that's one thing. But your coach says change it by 3, which is already very, quite aggressive. Most likely, I'm assuming things go off for a while. Like, where do you stand, I guess, in your game, but also with injuries, in believing things will turn out?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I was not great at that. I needed always convincing. I needed a lot of so I made decisions very fact-based, so I needed a lot of logical explanations of why we would change the forehand grip, let's say, or anything else. And so oftentimes my coach would come up to me and have video footage or show me patterns that I would repeat and tell me why it would be better, and then we would try it out. And oftentimes I did get convinced in the end. However, and I just talked about this luxury now as a writer and commentator to know what I didn't have compared to the greatest in the world. And that was one big thing. So I would always need to lose a few times before I was ready to change. So I'm going to try to explain it better. So somebody like Yannick Sinner, for example, he's a great example. He won the Wimbledon final, and I went to his press conference afterwards, and he won against Carlos Alcaraz. And in the press conference, he's sitting there, and he's like, yeah, I played a great match today, but already I could see that there were a few things that Carlos does better than me. So I wrote them down, and I'm going to go back and try to work on them so I can beat him the next time as well. And I never had that. I was not able to change while I was on top of the game. When you're full of confidence, and then changing is, I don't want to say it's easy, it's never easy, but when you're full of confidence, chances that it works out are much higher. But I would lose a few matches back to back and be like, oh, this what I'm doing is not working. Therefore, I need to change. And so then I would start to do changes when I was low in confidence. It took longer. It took more convincing. I had to try it longer. And the one thing that I wish I could have changed about my attitude going back to the beginning of my career is that I wish that when I was on top, when I was winning titles, that would have been the moment where I started to incorporate new things into my game, because I oftentimes did that when I started losing. And I see it with the best, they do it the other way around. They incorporate new things when they're on top of the world.
Yeah, I feel to me, like I've been thinking on this quite a while or quite a bit of late. It's the difference between self-confidence and self-belief.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So Can you elaborate?
So you build the self-confidence through the outside things that you achieve, right? The points that you make, the games that you win. Mm-hmm. I don't know, the social media that works, the comment, the praise that you get. Whereas the belief stems from actually following your path, from looking at your game and figuring out where your genetic ceiling is and how close you can get to it. One step at a time, because those outside metrics don't really matter for you to get to the very top of your game. And that I found is just not as fleeting as a self-confidence. Yeah. I don't know about you, but especially, you've always put your work out for the world to see. Whether you're a tennis player, you're a commentator, people experience the sport through you, you're a writer. Every Tom, Dick and Harry has an opinion. And I found that to be quite damaging for my process, and something that I changed. As I got older and old, I guess when you retire at 42, you like you said, you've got time to figure that sort of stuff out. But I'm just wondering, like, whether that is something where in hindsight you would say, okay, maybe, that's something I would have built on. You've built this resilience and you've built this kind of toughness, like, again, reading some of your Substack posts, how you deal with kind of the outside opinion, and exactly somehow it doesn't influence you, that you have these public opinions weigh on you. And then at the same time, I guess in the game itself, you need to figure your own way.
Yeah, but that's a very good point, because I wrote this. This is really funny. I think you're spot on, and I was processing it while you were explaining it, and I will give you I will give you an example why I think that you're 100% right. And one reason why in tennis it was tough for me to get to the very heights of my potential, just because my mind was maybe not built as that of an athlete. It was way more into analyzing than actually streamlining it. But as a writer, I wrote this big article about Novak Djokovic when there was a controversy around him with the vaccine stuff in Australia. And I published it in the Zeit. And I basically tried to take both sides into consideration. This was at a moment in Germany where people who didn't take the vaccine were absolutely scrutinized, right? So that was an absolute no-go. If you refused to get the vaccine, you were basically outcast in social life in Germany. And Novak had tried to travel to Australia on an exemption. They didn't let him in because he was unvaccinated, and he had spoken very publicly about not being vaccinated. And I was vaccinated, but at the moment I tried to take into consideration both sides, and I tried to also highlight him as a personality and why he would make a decision like that. Having known him since we were 12 years old and how he was when he was 13 and how he is now, I thought I knew why he made this decision. He has always been so specific about his body, even when we were 14 years old. I mean, we were 14 in the early 2000s. There was no vegan, gluten-free green juices, And he was already drinking, making his own food and making his smoothies and doing yoga. And we were laughing at him because we were teenagers and we wanted to have a good time. But he was always like this. And so I tried to explain that. And I got the most hate mail I had ever gotten in my life. I got, I think, 300 letters and emails of being like, oh, she's condemning Novak's decision. And just to make your point now, I didn't care. I didn't care one bit. And I do care when somebody writes me, when I write something and somebody writes me, I didn't like it because ABC. I oftentimes care and I take the critique to heart and I try to reread my thing and see where I've gone wrong. But exactly what you said, I so strongly believed in that piece. I had edited it for 2 weeks over and over again. It was exactly the piece I wanted to write. And every single word that was in there was chosen by me actively, and it was all that I wanted to say, and not a single letter of these hate mails got to me. I was like, that's what I wanted to write. That's what I wanted to say. Sorry about that. And I think that's the difference maybe also in writing and tennis, and why maybe I prefer writing. You can go back and you can change things, In tennis, it's hard. If the competition is over and you lost, it's over, and you're out and you have to go home. That was the most heart-wrenching thing in tennis. I would pack for 2 weeks of a tournament, come with 2 suitcases, and then lose on Monday and travel back with 95% of clean laundry in my suitcase. That really does you in.
Oh, Andrea, that's wonderful. Honestly, I love how you found yourself belief through that. I have a kind of an opening and a closing tradition, which I'm going to have to bring together because somehow we got to started chatting right away. But I would love to know what your definition of going mental is. What does it mean to you when you hear going mental?
Going mental. Actually, interestingly, when I read your the title of the podcast, Going Mental, for me, going mental is like going to a club or a concert and freaking out and pogoing through the crowd. That's what I associate with it first. That's like my number one thought on instinct. And strangely, going mental, I associate it with something positive, like going to extremes of your mental capability, but in a positive way. That's how I would interpret it.
Love it. Absolutely love it. And when was the last time you went mental?
When was the last time I went mental? You know what? I had a little freak out, which is, okay, please bear with me. This is a very stupid story, but you have to deal with this now. You can edit it all out. I don't care. So in summer, I had one period of time where I was working for 8 weeks straight. And the thing in tennis is Saturday and Sundays are not off because that's semifinals and finals. So when you work 8 weeks, you really work 8 weeks. There is not a single day off. And I was working. And in the 7th and a half week, I was in New York. There was a huge flood outside and there was a cockroach in my apartment. And I saw it. And you, having lived in Australia, you know how disgusting and big cockroaches can be. And I saw it and I looked away and then I looked back there and it wasn't there anymore. And I was looking for it and I couldn't find it. And I was and this is where I went mental. I was 100% sure. Then I did something that nobody should ever do. I went on the internet and I Googled psychosis, and I found one symptom on the bottom of the list that if you see insects, you're having a psychotic breakdown. So I convinced myself that this cockroach didn't exist, that I had seen it. And because I had worked 8 weeks straight, I was having a psychotic breakdown. And I was about to call a hospital and be like, guys, I'm having a psychotic breakdown. And the funny thing is, this is the athlete in me. While I was going through that, my mind said to me, hey, at least I know I'm having a psychotic breakdown. Usually people don't know, but I at least know. And while I was going through all that, the cockroach came back and I killed it. And I was glad I was not having a mental breakdown. That was the last time I went mental.
Andrea Petkovic, always even when you go mental, you're still in control. You know what your symptoms are. This has been wonderful.
That's what I thought.
I really, really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much for taking the time, sharing your thoughts and experiences. And I wish you all the very, very best. And recommend to all of the listeners, go and find Andrea's writing. It honestly is something unique. Last question. Are you translating your book?
No, not yet. Maybe I should. No, I'm writing a new one, but in German. Sorry about that.
Yeah. Well, the last one was in German too. Sorry, English listeners, you're missing out. Maybe convince Andrea, send her 300 mails pleading for a translation rather than some hate mail. Thanks, Andrea.
That would be nice. Thank you, Jan.